Hello, my name is Dr. Jean. We are ready now to introduce our first topic. The first topic is going to be the concept of distance and traveling. So distance is a very simple concept. It is a standard one-dimensional measure of space between point A and point B. Now, many people in 2022 believe that this is kind of an absolute truth, that is an intrinsic property of an objective, existing, physical universe. Well, let's look. So, again, if we want to standardize any measure at all, then we need some kind of assumptions. In this case, we place this point A and point B in a homogeneous, empty, influence-free, non-curved, hypothetical virtual space. And that is what the coordinate system is. You can only standardize distance, in other words, a standard measure of space between point A and point B, if your space is such. Without these assumptions, this standardization means nothing. And if we want to understand why that is, then we need to look at the idea of distance from the point of view of Vitologia. In practice, when we consider everyday life, then measuring the amount of space traveled through has to be on an established and relatively barrier-free path. And if this is not the case, if this hidden assumption that we no longer think about when we think about distance, because it's an ingrained idea in us that this thing is a given, that these hidden assumptions are not even there, then standardization of distance will lose all of its meaning. So let's think about this for a moment. If the path is not an established and relatively barrier-free path, then it's not going to be true that we can maintain a relatively constant speed. If a relatively constant speed is not possible, then the function of distance as a standard measure, in other words, the rule that at a constant speed the time invested is going to be proportional to the space traveled, is not going to hold true. Even in an established and relatively barrier-free path, unexpected things can happen. For example, a storm, or a traffic jam, or something like that. And in that case, constant speed is not going to happen. You cannot standardize distance because of conditions. Now, even if you could have a relatively established path with standard conditions that you can ignore because nothing unexpected is happening, even then you have to understand that in contrast to what happens in virtual space, in other words, in a homogeneous, empty, influence-free, non-curved linear space, in real time, traveling an established path is going to come at a price. So, yes, if you invest enough time, then you can cover a long distance. This is true. But this comes at a price of losing one's freedom. So, if you want to look left or you want to look right, you cannot stop and go somewhere because you are following an established path. You're going to lose time. There may not be appropriate road for you to the left or to the right. So you are going to go where the road takes you. Now, on the other hand, a new path may be very difficult. You may have to cut through barriers such as forests or mountain ranges or swamps. But you will see more. If you are interested in something on the left, you can go left. If you are interested in something on the right, you can go right. You will have your own path. But this is going to come at the price of extra effort. Now, if you maintain a relatively linear path in an established road, then you will lose this unique perspective. You will suppress your inner drives, your unique motivational system, and you simply decrease your chances for abundance. In other words, variety of experiences that you are motivated, you are interested in. So, this is kind of a metaphor between traveling and your life path. And in this metaphor, pursuing distance is like pursuing achievement, rank, popularity, fame, wealth, success. So what is common in pursuing distance, as in when you're traveling, maintaining your relatively linear path on an established road, and pursuing achievement, rank, popularity, fame, wealth, and success during your lifetime? Well, the common ground here is standardization. You can standardize things when you are moving along an established path, and you have standard measures such as distance, such as achievement. Now, established paths are very often overused, not always, but often. And that's going to mean that there have to be traffic rules, standardization, coordination, linearity, and homogeneity. But this is important because if you choose an established path, you're not going to be alone. There are going to be a lot of people there. There may be traffic jams, there may be congestions, and because of that, you need to introduce a lot of rules, and you have to obey those rules. Now, the other thing is that when you have these standard measures and relatively congested road, that is going to lead to competition. Now, with all of this, your own particular desires, your unique drives, your uniqueness in general is going to be suppressed to some degree. The natural congestion of all of this is going to be competition. Now, let's pause here for a moment because this is a little bit difficult to understand. We are ingrained to believe that competition is a good thing, and very often it is a good thing. But you have to understand that competition is by definition moving along an established path with standard rules. And doing that comes at a price. Yes, you cover more distance. Yes, you see the results of your investment of time and effort. But this comes at a price of suppressing your uniqueness because of standardization and coordination, because of an established path. And you go where the road takes you. Now, if you take this to the extreme, then inner harmony is going to be lost. Unique directions are suppressed, and there's going to be a conflict between the standard and the unique. Your sense of direction, your identity may be lost or at least damaged to some degree. and confusion and depression might ensue. So if you take this to the extreme and you let yourself go along an established path, then the price is going to be loss of uniqueness, loss of abundance of diverse information, and with that, you are going to suppress your inner drives, your inner unique motivations. And with that, you are going to get confusion and depression without noticing it. So you will feel that you're just not, something is not right, something is off. You don't know what your problem is, but this is your problem. And you just simply have not identified it. So notice that we are going to make a difference between active lifestyle in general and competition. You may be active in your own unique way, or you may compete and then you use standardization, and that's going to be part of your motivation to compete. Well, in this context, pursuing distance, going on an established path, following standards, is going to be competition. Whereas pursuing your unique path is going to lead to abundance of experiences, a mixture, a spectrum of unique experiences that you gather when you dare to go left and right from time to time. Now, competition with virtual standards are based on consensus. It's very important to understand that any kind of competition is based on consensus. And this is, of course, extremely useful in young people, where young people need some kind of direction. They need to see how they fit into society. So we test them, we let them compete, we let them use standards that we establish for their own good. And this is wonderful. In other words, competition has its usefulness in general, in everybody. But with young people, it's especially helpful. They need standards, they need direction, they need measures that are easy to understand. Now, competition overused later in life, where your uniqueness, your creativity should generally start to predominate. This will lead to problems because competition overused will naturally lead to loss of creativity, and it will naturally lead to congestion and competition. So competition will then create even more need for competition, and you're going to get into a vicious circle because you are not able to break out of standards. You are not able to use your uniqueness, which have been suppressed for quite a time now. New paths cannot be measured by distance. And this is the whole idea, that new paths are unmeasurable because they are unique. If natural uniqueness and variety create a unique life experience, an abundance of information, an abundance of life experience, then the concept of distance as a standard measure is not going to apply. Well, let's understand this for a minute. For competition, you need standards. For standards, you need established, well-defined, sharp contour, very clear rules. And this is fine, this is very good. But this comes at a price. If you follow standards, if you suppress your uniqueness, then you are going to lose something. Your creativity and your unique drives, your unique motivation. Results and achievements cannot and do not describe a creative course, a unique course, because you cannot compare one to the other because they are different, they are unique. And you cannot compare things that are very different, that are very unique. A creative course, a new direction, leads to abundance of life experiences. But this has a very important contingency. So in other words, life experience is only unique if you have abundance of information on one hand, but on the other hand, you have to process, integrate, digest this new information uniquely. No matter how much new information you gather, if you are unable to process this new information uniquely, if you are not able to integrate this new experience with your own unique system, then it's gonna lose its very usefulness. It's gonna lose its value. Now, we contrast competition and life experience as if there were two different things which are contradictory. Well, no. We are just exaggerating this difference between competition and life experience to make it easy to see that competition comes at a price and that there are alternative ways to competition. But competition and life experience very often go together. There's a balance between them. But just for the sake of simplicity, let's say again that competition is when you have an established path, you have a measurable distance, you have a relatively standard experience with homogeneity, following established rules based on consensus. Now, life experience, on the other hand, that's the other end of the spectrum, of a continuous spectrum, by the way. So in other words, you have your unique path, you have your own creativity, you have a variety of information based on your own unique drives, interests, and you will have the ability to process this new information uniquely. You do not import somebody else's ability to digest and integrate and interpret. You interpret this new information yourself. They are based on your own desires anyway, so you must be able to process any new information uniquely from your own perspective. So creativity, new directions will need exponentially more input processing, integration, and organizational effort. If you start anything new, really new, creatively, you will immediately understand that. So the price for a life experience-based thinking or life is that you will need a lot of information to be processed in a very unique way. Think about children. You see, children need a lot of sleep, especially infants or toddlers. And one reason behind that might be that for them there are a lot of new information to be processed. And sleeping is a form of processing and reviewing unconsciously. So they need a lot of sleep because they have a lot of new information. When if you start anything new, if you go to a new dimension, so you jump to a new dimension, if you if you start something that is radically new, like Vitologia, for example, then you will immediately see that you will need, even for ridiculously little steps, you need a lot of extra effort. And that's going to be very important to understand for later discussions. If you do not invest these extra efforts, if you neglect proper and unique digestion, integration, processing of the new information, then the system will destabilize and confusion and suffering will follow. So life experience-based thinking is going to need constant high energy mental activity, a lot of reviews, and granted, this review is very often unconscious, like during sleeping, in connection with dreaming, etc. But you also need to make a conscious effort so that you do not do shortcuts. You always do your own digestion of information. And it is very high maintenance, and for this high maintenance you are going to need a lot of mind organization, because without organization, maintenance is going to be even much harder. So luckily, when you are sick, when you have any kind of stress, when you're tired for any reason, you have a backup. You have something to fall back on. And that's something that you fall back on is called tradition. So tradition is going to be your greatest help, your greatest support, because from time to time you're simply too tired to maintain that high energy maintenance of new information being digested, etc. So you fall back on tradition. Tradition is going to be your best friend here. So uniqueness always needs to be balanced by standards of cooperation, beliefs, rules, customs, and laws. If you overdo it, then the system will destabilize, because you will not be able to process the information that you gain. So too much knowledge, too much information, which is ahead of your capacity to digest and integrate and process, is going to be harmful. And you need to, from time to time, fall back on tradition. So, from this, you will see that uniqueness does not equal independence. You will need a very strong tie to your community. You need a very strong connection with tradition, because you simply cannot do it alone. And I'm talking about human individuals here, but I could be talking about groups of individuals or communities also. So in other words, one community needs to be connected to other communities, because this information processing is very difficult, and from time to time you might need help from another community, and you definitely need information exchange. In other words, your life experience and their life experiences need to be exchanged and synthesized. Now, if you consider uniqueness and put it together with the idea of independence, then you have something very interesting, a new concept. It's called a unit. Now, a unit is a system or a structure that is relatively independent, that structurally or functionally has borders, contours, membranes, or walls. So there is some kind of a boundary between this part of reality and the other part of reality. That is a unit. Now, if you consider uniqueness together with the idea of interdependence, then a unit is not possible. So, of course, this is a spectrum. So the more interdependence you see, the more the concept of boundary is going to disappear. It's going to lose its usefulness. Now, this is a very hard concept. So we will talk about this a whole lot more in the future. Suffice it to say here that there is a difference between uniqueness and independence, leading to the concept of a unit, and uniqueness and interdependence, leading to the idea of an organic part. Because an organic part has no boundaries, it has no definite sharp contour. Structurally and functionally, it's fully integrated into a system. So if you had standard units, then that would lead to the idea of classes, sets, which has members and sets with members, classes with members, standard units. Then will lead to the idea of multitude, and that will lead to the idea of numbers. We will talk about this a whole lot more. Now, in the universe where you consider things to be organically in organic unity, then there are of course no units. There are going to be no definite sets and classes of things, and so there is no multitude and there is no numbers. Instead of that, you're going to have a local community with unique connected patterns. So you have unique patterns, but these unique patterns are not independent. They are organically complex, and you cannot cut and say that this is the boundary and these things are relatively connected more and these things are relatively connected less, and there is a definite boundary between more and less. No, there is an organic essential connection between all parts, both functionally and structurally. So what's going to be your worldview based on standard units? Well, you're going to have basically a coordinate system. You have a low-dimensional virtual space-time with consensus-based virtual standards, preset variables based on available measuring methods. In other words, you take one thing that you can measure, and that thing is going to be your angle, your aspect, your variable. And from that point of view, you measure things as if they were standard units. And this is exemplified by distance. So you have 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, standard units that you put on the top of the other. You have a multitude of meters, and a multitude of meters is going to give you the concept of numbers. In other words, very clearly defined units that you can count. Now, a worldview based on organic locality is based on a reality with infinite dimensions, because these complex patterns are completely interconnected and the complexity is potentially infinite. So you cannot count things that are not separated out. You can count only standard units. If there are no standard units, then counting is going to be a useful thing, but not a very deep, not a very natural thing. So you're going to need abundance because there are infinite dimensions, and if there are infinite dimensions, then the more information you are able to digest, the more you're going to maintain your uniqueness. And with that, we are going to switch topics now and go to our second topic. And that is mind activity, or more precisely, modeling mind activity. So you can immediately see, and this serves as a kind of an introduction to this, that from the point of view of Vitologia, what the mind is definitely not is a machine or a material entity. Yet, this is exactly what people think when they think about the mind in 2022. They model it as if it was a material entity and as if it was a machine, being a structure made up by replaceable parts, standard units. So, brain, neurons, neural networks, this is a special viewpoint that they think is standard and absolute, because that's how they look at the mind. Now, from the point of view of Vitologia, mind is alive because it's an organic part of reality. So it's co-substantial with life. It cannot be separated from life. And algorithms and programs may be very useful functional approximations, and standardization, coordination, and organization are going to be very useful applications of these standards, but ultimately they are not going to describe the mind. They are just going to be a very simplistic model of the mind. Mental activity is too unique, too variable, too complex to be measured by standard units. And we need to understand this on various different levels. In other words, we are not talking about mental activity as one particular function. We are not talking about mental activity as one particular physical unit. We are talking about mental activity as a pattern, as a complex organic pattern. But again, this is not what's happening in 2022. In 2022, people think of the mind as being linked to a physical universe, a physical reality, and the picture on the left symbolizes this point of view. Or they might also model the mind as if it was a neuronal network. A network of neurons or functional units that has an input, it has a definite function of integrating or processing that input, and then it has an output. And all of this thing is standard. So they kind of decompose the mind into certain functions, which they predefined. They are interested in certain functions, they are able to detect certain functions, and they are going to simplify the mind as a set of these functions. So you're going to have this special model of the mind as is prevalent in 2022 on the left-hand side, and you are going to get the critique of such modeling on the right-hand side from the point of view of Vitologia. So on the left-hand side we have the mind that is standard, made up by standard units with standard relationships between them. You have the neural networks and algorithms which are going to model the mind. You have one or several definite functions that the mind is used for, because the mind is, of course, like everything else in life, is a useful thing, and it has definite functions. The mind is going to be easily coordinated and standardized, because all you need to understand is what functions the mind has from your point of view, and then what are the common patterns around these functions. And then you can coordinate mind activity around these functions. Now, from the point of view of Vitologia, the mind has no standard units, no replaceable parts. It is made up by organic parts. We have very complex patterns that are going to mean an interconnection between these organic parts, so that the organic parts are not replaceable and they are not standard. They are unique. You have multifunctional, in other words, really infinitely functional minds or mind. So that means that you can pick out certain functions of the mind that you're able to detect with your scientific instruments, or that you are interested in, according to your predefined variables and aspects and viewpoints. But behind that, there is an infinitely complex system with infinite functions that are really not separated at all. They are interconnected. On the other hand, the mind is also proactive. It's active and it's creative, capable of growth and reproduction. The mind can reproduce. And it's also very unique, because by being proactive and creative, it may go to places where very uniquely. So you have a highly variable and system with multiple levels of local characteristics. So every function is going to be really unique on multiple levels. So to reiterate this, let's talk a little bit more about what this means. So according to the view prevalent in 2022, the mind operates with standard units. And these standard units are not necessarily structural units. They may be functional units. For example, you can have definite categories, rules, laws, commands, customs, which are standard units of functionality inside the mind. This is a model from the point of view of 2022 worldview. So you may look at complex system according to predefined variables that are predefined so that you can measure them by your scientific instruments. You see? And because these measures are predefined so that you can easily measure them by your scientific instruments, then you will find, in fact, that the dimensions that you set out to investigate the mind through are easily measured. Why? Because you set it up this way. Now, from the point of view of Vitologia, the mind operates creatively. The mind creates its own new models and new approaches. So, for instance, you might think about the kidney as a filter. And the filtering function of the kidney can be standardized and measured by various approximations. But in reality, the kidney is not a filter. The kidney is a multifunctional organ. And the kidney can set itself apart from your standard models because it can create new responses to different conditions. And your models of functionality is just simply not going to apply during those unusual circumstances. And the kidney is able to do this. The mind can form its own variables per its own unique life experience. It actively communicates, and active communications is going to throw up even more variables. There's going to be influence, and there's going to be reproduction by teaching or information flow. So the whole thing is alive. It is not static. your variables are going to change, and new variables are going to be necessary as new complex patterns will arise. New conditions, new set of conditions are going to arise. Then you will need new variables to follow this. So the mind, one part of the mind and the other part of the mind are going to be very difficult to standardize and measure and compare because of high complexity and extremely high variability along with this complexity. Now let's talk about structure a little bit. What does it mean? What is the price when you think about the mind as a physical entity? So if the mind is a physical entity, then of course it exists in physical space-time, and it exists only in physical space-time. It has a definite physical location, it has a boundary. You have individual separate units, one brain, another brain, another brain. These are all separate units. Yeah, of course they can have influence and communication, but somewhere at some level they are separate individual units. It is of course subject to physical, chemical, biological laws, and the perspective of one brain, one separate unit, is going to be local, with a specific local perspective, with local resolution, local sensitivity playing a part. But then if it's a separate unit, then this locality is going to be separated from other perspectives. And you will have an individual perspective that is sharply separated. And also, you have a physical separation between the observer, here the mind, and the object on which the mind focuses. So, you are going to have one unit, your brain, and you have another unit, the table that you are looking at. And the two are going to be separate. Now, from the point of view of Vitologia, this whole thing does not apply. Because the mind lives in a reality that transcends space-time. It has no physical location. It has no physical boundary. It's continuous. Yes, it is locally unique and it has a local perspective, but that perspective is not separate because of constant communication between one organic part of the mind and another organic part of the mind. So there's no separate individual perspective. It is not necessarily subject to physical laws only. There are non-physical laws that it is subject to as well that are also very important. In other words, physical reality is one projection of the mind. When you approach it from a physical point of view, then yes, it has physical processes, it has chemical processes, but that is only part of the mind's behavior. And you approach it from that angle so that you see that angle of the mind activity. So the perspective of the mind is going to be general. Locally unique, yes, but continuous and general. It forms an organic relationship between the observer and the observed. So you are not going to separate out a brain and the physical object. But the mind and the thing that the mind focuses on are going to be in a unique and organic relationship. That will give us the idea of organic attention. And organic attention is going to be a very big thing that we're going to talk a whole lot about later on. So, I understand that the approach taken by Vitologia is radically different from anything that you might hear in 2022. And so I thought that because this whole thing is so radically different, first I will advise you to kind of look at it as if you were reading text in a foreign language. There's going to be a lot of foreign words, and you cannot use the dictionary to kind of understand each and every word's meaning. No, you have to just get an impression, and then we talk a whole lot more about these things. Now the second thing is I'm going to introduce a little metaphor here, so that we more easily understand what this is all about. And that metaphor is between the mind and the poetry. So think about what a poem is. Well, a poem is kind of a mental structure, mental function that lives in reality, but it transcends space-time. A poem really has no definite physical location. Now, if you write down the poem, then that writing has a physical location, but the poem itself does not have a physical location. The poem actively influences, shapes, and forms the mind. So your mind is not going to be the same after you read the poem in comparison with what it was before. And also you are going to change the poem according to your own frame of mind, your own perspective. So the poem is going to be really an organic thing that is made up by both the poet and the person reading or listening to it. The poem has no boundary. It may have a beginning and it may have an end, and it may consist of words and lines and whatever. But the images, the emotions, the way it touches the minds has no physical limits. It's not a physical process. Well, it has a physical projection. I'm sure that the synaptic activity is going to change, and the chemistry in the brain is going to change. But that's just not the essential part of it. The poem is unique, but it is not separate from the mind. The two things form an organic, unique interaction. The poem is going to change as it creates an emotion, an image in somebody's mind, and the poem for that somebody is going to be a very unique. It will have a unique significance and meaning. On the other hand, the mind is never going to be the same once it is touched by a poem. The perspective is general. It was composed by somebody, and it is unique, and it is originally local, but it can influence and interact outside of its original domain. So the poet composed the poem, but the poem is gonna then diffuse out, and as it diffuses out, it's gonna change, because in everybody, the poem is going to revoke different memories and induce different emotions. So it may have a separate physical existence, but its content forms an organic unity with the reader or listener. So again, the poem may have a physical body, but its physicality is not its essential nature. A poem transcends physical reality. And the same way as it does, the mind also transcends physical reality. It has a physical projection, sure, structurally and functionally, but its content, its essence, is not describable by using physical dimensions only. Now, it's it's up to you. If you are interested in it's a physical projection only, then you limited yourself, and it's up to you. But the mind cannot be understood only using physical dimensions. And again, let's remember that we define dimensions as the number of variables that can describe a system, here the mind. So you may use 3 or 4 dimensions of physical space-time, but that's not going to be enough. The poem actively shapes reality by a unique interaction with the mind and influence. And this influence goes both ways, because again, your poem in your mind is not going to be standard. It's not going to be the standard one. In the same way, the mind actively shapes reality by unique interaction and influence. It's also a bidirectional, organic relationship between the mind and reality. The poem interacts organically with its subject, creating a new thing. The poem as you see it, as you react to it, as it shapes your mind. The mind also interacts with organic reality. And ultimately, as the poem is unique but not separate, the same way the mind is unique but not separate. So, in summary, we introduced 2 topics. The first topic was distance, and we used that as a metaphor for standardizing life paths, individual or community life paths. And then we tried to model the mind, and we found that the mind may be modeled in various different ways, but modeling the mind from the point of view of physical structure or standard functionality comes at a price. And the usefulness of such models have limitations. Now, with that, we are going to stop this video now, and the next time we are going to talk about a new topic. Actually, several new topics, and the first topic being fruits and fruit tree. So thank you for your attention, and goodbye.